Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We are really excited to have Prashanth Jothi of Hubspot as our webinar guest here at South Asian Success. It's been a while since we've done a webinar, a couple of months, so really excited to have you and actually have this platform again with everyone able to join. We are going to go through just a couple of quick logistics, then we're going to dive in. Hopefully, you all are seeing my slide screen here. Just want to make sure. Are you guys? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Okay. So kicking off, we're going to talk about you. So Prashant, I want to give you the floor just to introduce yourself and let everyone know a little bit about you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Parul. And I'm delighted to be here. And I also like the fact that it's a small group. We can make it conversational, have a good chat about all things that we're going to talk about. Uh, Quick background. So I am from India. Currently, I'm based here in Dublin, CSM here at HubSpot, looking after a corporate accounts UKI segment. I have a podcast called It All Depends. We can get into why I named that. But yeah, essentially targeting CSMs. I've been with HubSpot for 5 years next month, actually. And the fun
Ooh.
thing about HubSpot is that once you complete 5 years, you get a month sabbatical and a small bonus on top of that. So I can't wait for that. And yeah, my flywheel, my career has been like a flywheel. So I've tried product marketing, started off as a product marketer in an advertising agency, which I don't miss at all. And then I moved to sales in a startup for a couple of years, and then eventually as a CSM, and especially as a CRM product here at HubSpot. It kind of my experience kind of helps me advise customers because I've actually gone through those in my roles. So yeah, that's basically me. Quick snapshot.
That's awesome. And I did read your bio and I thought about this yesterday that having this cross-functional experience is so fantastic. Like coming into CS, there's been a lot of change in the past years, but I feel like you can at least help your team and others around you, like, having said, like, I've done sales, it's not that scary, right? It can be a great asset. So I thought that was
I think, and I
cool.
also think, Paro, like years ago, I think the folks who started off as a CSM, more often than not, they actually don't have a CSM experience. They usually have a diverse experience coming into CSMs. Only nowadays, I actually see in the past couple of years that people start off as a CSM, which is new to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that that's how many of us, started.
All
Nobody
right, yeah.
knew what we were doing. And here we are. So, okay, well, let me just go into a few logistics. So if you guys just keep your microphone muted unless you are talking, and feel free to like raise hands or do anything. We have a small group, so we can also ask questions as needed, but we will have questions at the end too. So if you want to save them, we want to hear from everybody. We are recording. I think I mentioned that already. And then just a little bit about South Asian Success. So I think everyone knows we launched officially in January 2024. And our goal is to create a collaborative space for customer experience and customer success folks who have South Asian heritage or celebrate South Asian culture to learn and grow and drive diversity in thought and practice. So we're a global community. We're primarily online. We are in person. I put future. I got to change that now because we've been in person now in two places, in India and in Toronto, in Canada. So we're in person globally. We have several ways to engage with our community, and I've been talking a lot to people about this, and I hope others on here will agree. But what we're really about is, I think, raising up South Asian voices, especially in CS, where we might not have the volume and the numbers, but we really do have a presence almost in every country, right? As many people here can attest to. So trying to give people platforms to grow their personal brands, such as on our blog, in our webinar series, in our chai chats. We always try to have somebody like with fresh ideas and a unique take. So if you are interested, check out all the links using the QR code. And oops, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. So now we don't need slides for this portion. So I'm going to unshare, and then we're just going to chat with you, Prashant, and dive in. So we are South Asian Success. So we always ask our speakers first and foremost Are you team coffee or are you team chai? How do you wake up in the morning, or are you team no caffeine?
So back when I was in India, it was always chai and samosa. But then
Okay.
but then once I moved away, it's actually moved into black coffee Americano. I think it's more out of the need for caffeine than really enjoying it. You know what I mean? It's more for just waking myself up and going for work. So it's team coffee right now.
Yes, I think I've had the same transition in my life too. Coffee out of need. I do like it, let's be honest, but it came out of a necessity. Let's learn a little bit about you. Where did you grow up? I think you mentioned a little bit about your background to the group prior. Where'd you grow up? What are you doing now? Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, so my parents are originally from Chennai, but then I was born and brought up in Jharkhand, a little city called Bokaro Steel City. Almost no one knows about it. So I was born and brought up there. So my parents speak in Tamil. They know Hindi as well, but I reply to them in Hindi because, I can read and write Hindi, but I can't read and write Tamil. I can speak broken Tamil. So that's how I was kind of brought up. And then I went to Pune for my bachelor's degree. And then I moved to Singapore after that. So I was in Singapore for around close to 8 years. So I worked there in the advertising agency that I mentioned as a product marketer. Uh, and then I moved to a startup in Moscow for for a year. So that was a really interesting experience. I worked as a product marketer there, and then I moved back to Singapore where I joined Hubspot for a year before moving and getting a transfer to Dublin where I'm at. So currently I'm in. It's going to be 4 years end of this year since I moved to Dublin, and I moved at the peak of COVID. And when I moved here, it was like zombie land. Everything was shut. And I was like, oh shit, I actually made a mistake moving here. It was just horrible. I've never been to Dublin, so I just made a call to just move to Dublin. But yeah, I couldn't find an accommodation, so I had to live in a hotel for 7 months. Couldn't save anything, eating out every day, so all that stuff. But survived that, and then I brought my family. I have a 3.5-year-old son. So I brought my wife and son here. So we've been here for 4 years now.
Truly, like a truly global experience. And even within India, like having, I think different cultural experiences is so cool. That's one of the things I think a lot of people, don't realize about a lot of even South Asian nations and countries. There can be so much language differential, probably similar even in the
Yeah.
Middle East, right, Mohammed? Like culturally, just you're right next door, but things can be so different. So that, I mean, I did not know about the Moscow part. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Learning something new. Um, I mean, I'm not going to put you on the spot truly, but I'm curious, like, of the places that you've lived, where did you really feel like, wow, I really could come back here in retirement? I could come back and live here someday.
I think Singapore, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
It, it's just I shouldn't say perfect, but it's pretty close. Uh, it's and it actually spoils you in a way. So the transportation is convenient. There's really good food at a cheap price. The people are great. You have great opportunities there. It's a great hub to travel to and explore Southeast Asia. Uh, so when I moved here, I always used to compare. I was like, oh, the transportation sucks here in Dublin, things like that, and the weather sucks here, all that comparison. So in a way, it kind of spoils you. But then, yeah, I would definitely consider eventually maybe moving back to Singapore, and also the fact because it's closer to India. So I have my parents there, I have my sister there, so flying back instead of the long journey back, which is like once a year maybe. I'll consider flying to India. So yeah, those things. Singapore.
Yeah, it is a beautiful place. I can see what you mean. All right. So we have, oh, sorry, I'm just admitting a couple more people that are joining. Okay, so let's talk about like these global experiences. How do you feel like obviously your career history having variation in actual fields that you worked in, but also globally, how did that impact the work that you do as a CSM now, or even in the past when you first got started? How did that sort of I guess influence what you do and how you choose to interact with your customers?
I think, like I briefly mentioned initially, is especially because I deal with the CRM platform where you have the marketing, sales, you have that one single source of truth, and you want to align all the different departments into that product. And because I had those experiences, I can actually leverage that experience and consult a marketing director uh, better and how to leverage the product. So I have the product knowledge, I have the field knowledge. So and I need to find a way to wrap that up and communicate that with a marketing director, for example, a chief sales officer, for example, so things like that. So that's been really helpful in that sense because of where I'm at and what product I'm actually consulting them with, but also on the adaptability piece because I really had to. Initially, it didn't make sense because I was a product marketer and then I went to sales. I was like, oh, what am I doing? But then, to be honest, like my least favorite one was sales. So it's like CSM, product marketer, sales, probably in that order. Uh, but I still wasn't like sure, like, oh, what am I doing? I was kind of questioning when I moved to sales. But then now, when look back, it actually kind of makes sense. Like, okay, that kind of helped me to where I'm at. So in the moment, sometimes it just wouldn't make sense. You're like, oh, what am I doing? So I did that for a couple of 2 years, and then moved to CSM. So yeah, I think those two things are.
Yeah, that's a great insight. And for people, I think that might listen in and say, like, I want to get into CS or haven't done CS before, it's having some breadth allows you to relate to different customer types, especially in a particular vertical where you might actually, they, might have the job you held at some point, a salesperson, right? A sales leader that you can actually directly relate to. So it's kind of cool.
Even
Did
like
you start?
trying to
Oh, yeah.
get a job as a CSM, so I could actually create a storyline on, okay, I have the marketing experience, I have the sales experience. Now I'm ready to delight my customers with the experience that I've had. So just creating that storyline and that diverse experience could help you get a job as well, opportunity.
Yeah, and I'm curious, did you struggle at all during these transitions or during even the moves? Like, what were some of the challenges that you saw that you felt that maybe you had to work to overcome?
Uh, when it came to the role itself, Harold, I think sales I really struggled with because of the specific quota that they had and how intense it can be. And I wasn't really used to that as a product marketer, and especially the cold calling piece. I dreaded cold calling. I was like, oh, geez, this is the worst thing. Uh, so so I really struggle with that. But then I I reached out to like mentors or tenured sales reps who actually helped me out with that. Uh, and like going back to the adaptable piece, it's like important to actually get in those reps uh, and and really just trust the process in a way, even though sometimes it just doesn't make sense. But just trusting the process and just diving into it. I like to kind of I have that approach where I just sometimes I just don't think too much and just dive in and okay, later we'll figure it out. It's sometimes I do things. So luckily enough, it kind of worked out this time.
Okay, yeah, I mean that's kind of yeah, that's I think that's an interesting way to approach things because if you overthink it, you can talk yourself out of it, right? And it can make your challenge greater almost in a way. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Okay, so I want to talk to you a little bit about you got into CS and you decided one day, I don't know if this is the right way to put it, but you decided like I'm going to build my brand. I'm going to make a presence for myself in this space, right? And I mean, you are a LinkedIn influencer, right? We can call you that if that's a thing. Um, how did your journey begin? Like what was that like? What did you say one day, hey, I'm gonna, because I was following you, trust me. This is like around the time, and I always tell people this story that I didn't really know a lot of people in LinkedIn world. And I just started looking for people that were doing things. And I noticed you because you were posting every day and it was about relevant customer success topics. So kind of curious, like how did you start your journey in your building your personal brand?
Yeah, so I clearly remember this. So the moment I got the CSM job, I was in and out before that on LinkedIn. I used to post like a week, and then a couple of weeks I would just won't post anything, like there wasn't any proper cadence. But then once I got the CSM job and I had like a few weeks time off, and I read this book that I recommend everyone to check it out. It's by Dave Gerhardt, Founder Brand. And it talks about he goes really deep into the LinkedIn piece and creating is more focused on like founders and how he actually, so he's a marketing director, so I got to know him when I was a product marketer, and how he actually convinced his CEO back then to create that brand. And he gives you very tactical advice on how to do that. It's a really good read. So I read that because I was like big into Dave Gerhardt and his content and everything. So that kind of inspired me. And I'm the guy who always like, not always, like more often than not, I kind of fall into that trap. But okay, let's wait for the perfect time to start. Even when it comes to like day, I was like, let's wait for Monday and I'll begin. So I was actually in that phase, and then I had to like convince myself, like, heck with that, let's just start. And then it was like, I I clearly remember it was like on Valentine's Day for some reason. I was just like, okay, let's just post. Let us post every single day from that day on. And and the approach that I took was, for me personally, it's my personal preference. I just can't absorb long, uh, lengthy post. I just can't. I need like very short tactical posts, like just get to the point and tell me what it is. So that perspective, I was coming from, and that was my preference. So that is what I actually started off with. So every time it was very tactical, and where I came from was essentially as a CSM. When I started doing something, I'll just like from my day to day, I was picking up. I was like, I had a conversation with a customer and I tried something, and it worked, or it didn't work. I also used to share like things that didn't work and like some fails, which is kind of I'll try to frame it in a funny way. So that's how I started. Like I committed to it. Like every single day, I'm gonna post. And on the weekends, I used to share like some personal stuff, like was going on a hike or something like that. So but I made sure I was like consistent, and I'm kind of like more on the OCD side. So that everyday consistency thing, like I was like, oh, this is nice. I like this. So it kind of helped me with that as well. But then just keeping it consistent, and and then I reached out to I made a lot of great friends over on LinkedIn. So that kind of kept me going throughout the years. And yeah, that's basically how I kind of like began and like started off on this journey.
Okay, so you were doing, this is so interesting because I've been to a couple of like conferences where I went to the session on brand building, and a lot of the LinkedIn gurus will tell you that. Like they'll say, post every day, build a schedule, do this. And you were doing that, I think, before people were preaching it. So it's kind of cool that you came up with this story. I did post the book in the chat for people that are interested in reading
Oh, cool.
but I'm curious what you how do you stay engaged? Like, okay, two-part question. How do you stay engaged in doing the posts, right? Because that I think takes time. And then the second part is how do you I sometimes fear this, and I haven't done it enough to know, but that like the person I just talked to is going to see my post and they might not like that I posted it. How do you like frame it so that it is a story that doesn't give too much away in a way? You know what I mean?
Oh, okay. Interesting. Okay. The first question. Uh, So how I basically kept it engaging, and how even for myself, like how I
Yeah,
kept it
like
consistent, like
hey,
just
how do
not
I
getting bored. Yeah, not getting
right.
bored of it at the end of it. Uh, so the one that I mentioned was actually getting into sliding into the DMs is what kind of helped me, like making friends like Alkak and Shruti are here and yourself, Parul, just like connecting with those people in that one-to-one level instead of like the comments and things like that. So I was really like, because of my global experience that I've got the opportunity, I was always interested to get that perspective as well from, whether that's Shruti in Boston or Kak in Jordan, like getting their perspective of, hey, how are you guys doing this? How are you guys doing that, this and that? So I was very interested in that, curious to know that, and interested in building that international relationship. So that kind of helped me stay engaged on the platform itself. But at the beginning, like when it comes to like the post engagement, you're not gonna start getting like, oh, 100 likes and 50 comments and things like that. Uh, so that was kind of like, to be honest, because I started off like, and I see other LinkedIn influencers like, oh, 10K followers, that'd be cool. That'd be a cool vanity metric. But then, and I, and to be honest, I was like, hey, that'd be cool to have, 10K connections. That is how I started off. Uh, and and at times it would actually discourage me. I was like, okay, only two people like my post, and that was gonna suck. Uh, but then that consistency helped me to build and bring that engagement up. We can get into the tacticality of like what I did, but then the consistency and like the sliding into the DMs, as I say, it kind of helped me keep the engagement on a personal level and on the post level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that does. And I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head because sometimes people get discouraged. Like you start doing something, you don't maybe get the activity that you want, and then you get discouraged. So there's a lot of imposter syndrome, right, around social media.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, okay, so the second part of my question, like obviously you drew from your experiences of the day. I remember I read like Nick Mehta when he was really active on LinkedIn too. He would post every day. He'd be like, "I had this conversation. This is what we talked about." How did you take that? I think A, it's like translating it in the right way, but B, it's also like taking the fear factor out of it because again, I think for me, it's always like I've been having a lot of founder conversations and I was thinking like I should really share some of this stuff. And I don't want those founders to feel like I'm calling them out. That's not the goal, right? But it's they're learning ops. So I'm kind of curious how did you how did you merge the two or make that less scary in a way?
I'm also glad you brought up imposter syndrome. I think it was my co-founder Dharmesh, Hubspot co-founder. We were in a meeting and he mentioned like uh, that only folks who are not imposters feel imposter syndrome. You know what I mean? Do you get that? I was like, oh, that is
Okay.
interesting.
Ah,
You know,
that is very
uh,
interesting.
so if you get imposter syndrome, that means you're not an imposter. You know what I mean? Uh, so that was kind of like that kind of clicked in for me. So mindset wise, that helped me with that, and also like the fear of being embarrassed. Like I'm putting myself out there. Like what if like somebody makes fun of my post that I did this and all that. So that mindset, that meeting actually helped with that. But on how I'm framing my day to day is basically, I'll give you an example. Now that we have like Gong, there's an AI feature called Ask Anything in Gong, and you just ask like based on the call, you're just like, what did I do uh good as a CSM on this call? Let's say let's just take that as an example, and it'll actually list it out, and it can be pretty savage as well. Like how can I improve the next call? And it'll be pretty savage. Like once I did, and it was like pretty savage on like how I suck. So it can go either ways, but so tools like that I leverage on how I could have done that better. The the onboarding, when I went through the CSM onboarding, I still have that notes. So I still go back to that notes and some of the frameworks that I use, some of the types of calls that I use as a CSM. So for example, okay, one thing that comes to mind is like let's say there are 6 or 8 types of calls that I do as a CSM. One post can be, hey, these are the 8 types of calls that I use as CSM and just list it out. The other post can be like, okay, let's dig into each of those calls. Uh, so that's one example to kind of scale and how you would approach on the content generation piece. Uh, and just like from your calls, actually, from your customer call, every day there's always something you learn or you probably suck at. Just coming up with those content is just pretty easy in that sense. And also the other part is like reusing those content is actually one of the best ways to kind of no one like saw your post. Not everyone saw your post like 2 months ago. So just repurposing those content has been pretty valuable. So those kind of ways I scale and create content. Yeah, that's
That's
helpful.
that's awesome. Okay, so really creative use of Gong. I did not even think to ever use it that way. I'm not using it now, but I was in the past, and that like I think that's the beauty of hearing from people that are doing things differently. Like you learn how to maybe employ your own tool that you have sitting there that you can use a new way. But okay, I love that. And then even repurposing, right? Like I think you're right. And the LinkedIn algos are really interesting now. Like they've evolved so much and changed that if you are on LinkedIn, I see people liking stuff that I posted like in November, and I'm like, what? This is so strange because it's just coming up in their algo. So there is a bit of like evergreenness to your content, right? Too, that you can like,
Hmm.
it can be relevant for a long time. And if you want to repost it, you can repost it in a new way. I would love to have a LinkedIn person on here tell us like, what is this algo doing these days? Um, how did LinkedIn affect your brand at work? Like you, obviously your day job, right? And we were kind of talking about that there's maybe some stigma on social media from some folks that like, hey, like you have this day job and then you're doing your kind of personal posts. How did it affect your brand or did you have like conversations about it at work or anything like that?
So it definitely affected my brand here at work in a good way. So even when I started off when I got the job, I started posting, and when I joined HubSpot, then I used to be called the LinkedIn guy, and that kind of became my brand among my colleagues. Uh, but then even on the management and manager, executive level, they actually recognized me with the podcast that I did, with all the different engagement that I had. So that really helped me build a really good brand on, okay, he's strategic, he's ready for X opportunities internally. So things like that. So because I'm showcasing that externally and they are engaged as well, people talk. So hopefully the good things. So in my case, it actually helped me leverage and get a lot of opportunities in that case. So next week I'm going to Inbound. So I got a speaking gig there, where I'm speaking to taking a session, attending executive meetings. So those kind of opportunities really helped me. It's I mean, LinkedIn is definitely part of that. Uh, the other part is even like with promotion, because you have to build a business case. So even so I was a team lead last year, and when I was building up my business case to become a team lead, I leveraged my LinkedIn presence, the engagements that I get, the opportunities that I've gotten. So I leveraged that, and that was one of the main points why I got the team lead opportunity, because it shows that you're genuinely invested in CS, and you're genuinely passionate about the space. So people like managers tend to like, okay, he's genuinely passionate about this. Let's give him more opportunities to kind of expand and grow.
That's awesome. And that's really, I mean, that's cool to hear. I think that's such a positive experience that you're having. And I think it's great to hear that people are actually even, showing how you can educate others can help you get a job where you actually do help
Yeah.
others enable, and do their jobs better. So, very cool. Okay. I have one more question, but I'm gonna wait and open it up to everyone else because I know that you all probably have some more questions for Prashant, and we can jump into some of those, and we'll save like a few minutes at the end, maybe if there's anything left over. Does anyone have a question on any of these topics that we've been discussing? Feel free to just unmute if you'd like to. Not yet. No one. Okay, well then I'm gonna ask. I still have questions to ask, so I'll keep going. But you guys chime in if you need to. Okay, so let me ask you this. So we talked about this a little bit at the very beginning before the group joined, but you've sensed it. I've sensed it, I'll be honest, more in like other forms of social media, but a little bit of like negativity surrounding people that are
Hmm.
influencing or posting a lot and things like that. What have you kind of observed, and what do you think are ways that people could overcome that if they were observing that or feeling that from their community?
Yeah, the stigma piece that we were briefly talking about. Uh, there's an Insta account. I recently discovered that like a few weeks ago. I think it's called Best of LinkedIn or something like that. And they
Ah.
they they basically like make fun of like they take a screenshot of the post and they make fun of folks. And the recent one, it went viral because like someone posted about the wedding, and they somehow connected that to business. So people were like talking shit about that. So that's how like a lot of like stigma around like what type of content is suitable for a platform like LinkedIn, and those kind of stuff. I think how I've actually overcome, it's not like a place, it's not like a destination that you arrive and like, okay, I'm not gonna get affected by anything. It's more like it's journey. Like sometimes you are gonna get affected by some comments and things like that. Uh, but what I've actually done is to have this close group of connections, uh, who are actually in the same season when it comes to like posting on LinkedIn. They're very active. They're out there. For example, I have a small set of group of friends who are who are consistently posting on LinkedIn, who have a podcast. So if someone's like upset or sad about some comment or something, we have that safe space to kind of keep us all encouraged or motivated in that sense. So I've actually that close group has been super helpful in that sense. Uh, and also like, people, if people start talking, making fun of you, or if you get featured in that Instagram account, actually, I guess you're doing great, because you're doing something good. That's why you're getting posted there. So it's more about perspective and mindset, and having like a trusted space for you to kind of get over it. Because as I mean, I'm a big believer of consistency, but then someday along the line you are gonna get, break that consistency. Life happens. So having those options have kind of helped me uh stay away from that. Even now, like a couple of weeks ago or a month ago, I posted a post, and then there were like opposing comments, and sometimes I do get like there's a warm feel, like it's like, oh shit, they're going against what I said. But I take that as a learning experience. Again, like it's more mindset, not so much tactical, if that makes sense. Uh, and then after a bit you just kind of get over it, and then you post the next, your content. But having those like close group has been pretty helpful for me.
So yeah, you're speaking our language, the power of community, right? And having a place that you can go and talk about stuff. And I will be honest, I hear you on the. I think I made a post about women's basketball or something in the US recently, and I got somebody saying something. It was kind of like a negative comment on there. It wasn't negative
Mhm.
about my post, but it was like how I framed things didn't fully resonate. And I was like, oh my God, am I not getting diversity right? Like I started to freak out. And then I'm like, wait a minute, like, I think there are layers and levels to things that everything that we do is not going to be just like this is what I post on LinkedIn and it's cut and dry and there's nothing else to it, right? And I think sometimes you're posting to actually start conversation or to learn from somebody else. So every time that you said that you get it's a learning opportunity, that could be an opportunity to say like, oh, I need to expand maybe my viewpoint or whatever, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
um yeah, that's really interesting.
Like fun and
Yeah, and
games. Yeah.
I
Hmm?
think, but like to be frank, and then let's just be honest, right? If something bothers you too much, I think there's a side of it that also says it may not be the thing to do, right? Like I think we all should protect our own mental health, right? And
Yeah.
everyone's got life challenges and things. So if you find yourself affected too much by what's going on, maybe it's not the best place to be in. Maybe there's other nurturing environments like friends and community that you can find to still share ideas and things like that. So I mean, I think that you're right.
Yeah.
You need to have a little resiliency though, right? Like to be able to
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
and take this as a learning opportunity. Um, okay, I'm gonna ask one more time for questions because I have one more for you, but I'm just gonna see if anyone has any. Anyone? We're just so thorough and complete. I'm so proud of me and you. Okay. All right. So my last question for you, and we'll wrap it up then. Is there any advice that you have for our South Asian success community or others that are just interested in, hey, I'm looking to it's kind of two parts of your career. I'm looking to maybe cross oceans. I want to work in another country. How do I even think about doing that? And then the second part is, or I'm looking to build my personal brand. How do I get started? What are some thoughts on those two aspects of your journey?
Yeah. Another way I've actually looked into like posting regularly on LinkedIn is, that we often don't talk about this small thing called luck, which which plays a part in your career and in your the brand building and opportunities that you get. Uh, but the more I posted, I was just expanding my horizon and maybe get lucky. Does that make sense? If I'm like posting regularly, I might get lucky somewhere. Is basically, and this is like in all honesty, it's like, oh, I might get lucky. Some manager might see my post and they would think I might be a good fit for a certain job. So things like that. So I am definitely, that is definitely one of the goals. In all honesty, I, I might get lucky and get another opportunity there out there. That might be better than HubSpot. Who knows? So I think that is important if you are planning to get a job. I think this is a great way to kind of, leverage and find those opportunities. And for example, if Dublin is where you want to go, if there are certain companies that you want to reach out to, like attending these sessions. And for example, you attended this session, and you can actually reach out to me and DM me on LinkedIn, like, "Hey, Prash, uh, I was there for that webinar. I'm actually looking into like uh, X opportunity in HubSpot, X opportunity in Dublin in some of the companies. Can you help me in some way?" So there's a connection to that. There's a storyline. Uh, so leveraging these kind of opportunities are really great way to kind of get those opportunity globally, especially because coming from India, I know the pain of visas is just plain painful. So first thing you need to get a job, and then there's a visa. So if there's a visa element to it, it is like added complexities and challenge for us. Uh, so you have to build that relationship, network with folks around. I'm sure like a lot of folks here who are overseas can relate to that. Uh, so yeah, just putting yourself out there to increase your chances and just building that relationship, genuine relationship, because uh, I often get DMs saying the first thing I accept, and then the first thing they're like, "Hey, help me get a job," and it's like that's not the way. Like even like questions like, "Oh, do you think there's any openings in HubSpot?" I'm like, guys, do some research, come with a specific role that you're interested in, and then, I can't do a research for you. So make things like easier for the folks who you're trying to ask help from. Uh, and yeah, I think I'm like blabbering a lot, but then I think those are some ways to kind of get those opportunities like globally. What was the other question, Parul?
No,
Sorry.
you kind of covered it because I think you were saying like, well, I asked you like the decision to build your brand, and I think you were saying like, sort of both. Like one is by putting yourself out there, you might actually get noticed, right? So,
Yeah.
to kind of like just start and show your expertise, whichever area it is, especially for people in the job market, because that is, we know, a very prevalent situation today. And then I think you jumped into obviously the complexities, but building relationships. And I think that's awesome because for those in the job market, I've heard from so many people that like the jobs are getting that people are actually landing are referral jobs. They're people that they know, that they're networked with, they trust. And I also agree with you. Sending over a resume on day one is not like the play, right? The play is, hey, would love to chat and get to know you and, like do something genuine. And then we can send the resume. But I think you kind of answered it. I've been asking you double part questions, which is really not fair. But so sorry for that. Just this had the duality of these two topics. Rohan, Rohan wants to know about your podcast and what's behind the
Oh,
story behind
yeah,
the
the
name.
name.
And tell us
You
about it because we didn't get to talk about it.
you also started off with that whole thing that I'm gonna share it later. So I was waiting for it. Why?
That was my bad. I didn't direct any questions to that. So yeah, please do share
Yeah.
more about it.
No, Ron, when I started off, I was like planning to build a podcast, and I was like, how do people even like name pods? Like I had no clue how they name it. But then one thing I noticed during my conversation with folks in the CS space was like to every question, the answer always like, oh, it depends. Oh, it depends. Which kind of makes sense, right? Like it's always different. There's so much context
Yeah.
especially on the CS space, to kind of advise you on the tacticality or strategy piece. So I was like, okay, let's just name that. It all depends. And the funny thing is, right, I would have named it. It depends, but I just didn't get the domain, and I didn't want to fork out like it was like $20,000. Obviously not worth it. So I was like, oh, it all depends. So that's how I came up with the name, Ron.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah. It's the whole thing about not overthinking about the name, right?
Yes, yeah. Even in my pod when I have guests, uh, they'll also like, oh, it depends, and then they'll start off with the answer, so it kind of like flows well.
You get more branding on your podcast again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I have a question. So why did you decide to start the podcast? Like what triggered the podcast, coming about?
Yeah, I think two ways, Shruti. So the first one was I was listening to like uh, the other CS podcast. One thing I noticed, it was always directors or VPs or managers that come up as guests in CS post, and I used to listen to that, and then as a CSM, as an individual contributor, I was like, okay, that was great, good to know what they shared during the pod, but how can I implement that in my day to day? And more often than not, that wasn't the case. I couldn't do any of that. But it was good context to know, but I couldn't implement any of that in my day to day as a CSM. So I was like, okay, let's maybe try to close that gap. So that was one part of it, and the other one was I just wanted to like learn from other CSMs from other different industries, different companies, different verticals, different segments. So, and I've learned so much, and I've implemented so much as a CSM in my current role. It's been super helpful, and my thought process was like, okay, even if it like kind of fails, I would have learned quite a bit from the CSM. So it was win-win, anyways. So those two reasons why I started.
Cool. Great.
That's great. I mean, that's definitely a great point that you call out too. I mean, we often talk in big CS process terms. We don't always talk in like tactical and how do I just get this thing done, right? And
Yeah.
actually engage with my customer terms. So yeah, that's awesome. Any other questions from the group? Things that have come up? I'll put the link to your podcast in our YouTube as well, so
Awesome.
people can
Thank
come and
you.
check it out. And yeah, I mean, this has been fantastic. I think we really touch on a lot of cool things, and I'm sorry I didn't even include the podcast. So I'm glad you guys brought that one up. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing all these insights. I think very, very, very useful and tangible insights. I think people can really, take in and try some new things. And, maybe it's also part of just like stop the overthinking and just do it and take some of the fear factor out, because that's the only way we ever get started. So yeah, it's been awesome to have you on.
Yeah, thanks, Parul. Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And for everyone else that is here, I'm just going to show a couple of upcoming things for the community. Next week, 2 weeks, we have our chai chat with Asha May. So Asha took a career break, and she's going to talk about how that career break led to breakthrough in her career and what she's up to now. And it's going to be more conversational format. It will not be recorded for those that are going to be able to attend that. That's community only. And then we'll have a webinar coming up in October with Rupesh Nair, talking to him about building a CS platform and really understanding like kind of how did he go about tackling the challenge that is CS process, right, in his role. And then we also have some new work on the blog coming up, blog piece from Swati coming up this month. If you are interested in posting, joining, writing, anything, click the links, check them out, and let me know, and happy to engage. And thanks again to our awesome guests and for everyone that joined us today. And hope you all have a great rest of your day and an awesome weekend ahead.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Parul.
Take care. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.